And the more I think about this, the more I'm convinced that one of the ways imposter syndrome manifests in our work lives is that we have been programmed to not share projects or events or circumstances where we crush it because we've been conditioned to not brag about or boast about our professional accomplishments. So, in some ways, the opposite of boasting about something is to make ourselves smaller so we don't inconvenience anyone and so we don't seem like we're arrogant.
You're listening to Prospecting on Purpose, where we discuss all things prospecting, sales, business, and mindset. I'm your host, Sara Murray, a sales champion who's here to show you that you can be a shark in business and still lead with intentionality and authenticity. Tune in each week as we dive into methods to connect with clients, communicate with confidence, and close the deal.
Hello, and welcome to a solo episode of Prospecting on Purpose. Today, we are talking about a very buzzworthy topic, and that is this concept of imposter syndrome. 70 to 84% of professionals experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career or their lifetime. So you probably know what it is because you've probably experienced it as well. But essentially, it's this feeling that you are an imposter, the feeling or fear that you're going to be found out or revealed as a fraud, and that someone may reveal that we don't know what we're doing. And so it's just overall fundamentally this feeling of feeling not good enough. For this episode, I'm going to share a little bit of context about why I'm recording this episode specifically, because I experienced a situation where I didn't have imposter syndrome and probably should have, but I didn't. And it was awesome. And I want others to be able to experience the same thing. So we're going to go into that context there. And then I'm going to get into some questions that you can ask yourself to uncover if you may be suffering from imposter syndrome. And then we're going to wrap up with 8 tips on how to quiet or squash or kill our imposter syndrome. Number 7 is particularly important. I'm recording this about 3 weeks after I presented a discovery session at the Forbes Travel Guide Summit in Las Vegas. And this event is a gathering of the world's luxury hospitality leadership community. And lovely listeners, this event is badass. It is a pretty intimate group, around 800 people. It's inclusive of hotel owners, luxury brands, general managers of 5-star hotel properties from around the world, and executive leaders, including thought leaders. They all gather for 2.5 days of symposiums, breakout sessions, networking, celebrations, and awards for their distinguished achievements. It is a very big deal to win a 5-star rating from Forbes Travel Guide. And so, as you can imagine, this event had to be highly curated to a group of people that are delivering the best in class luxury. So stakes were high. They did not disappoint. And, I have to tell you, when I was walking into the hotel in Vegas and checking in and starting to meet people, I couldn't believe I didn't have imposter syndrome. However, leading up to the summit, I actually did have a sweeping wave of imposter syndrome when I started to look at all of the other speakers. That's kind of where this idea of wanting to put together this episode came from. So I started requesting the other speakers on LinkedIn. They are very high profile people, so they have a lot of followers. I'm sure they get a ton of messages. And so I just wrote a little note saying, hey there, we're both presenting at the Forbes Travel Guide Summit. I'd love to add you to my LinkedIn network. I'm looking forward to meeting you in Las Vegas. And just to give you an idea of all of the other speakers, first, Jane Krakowski, the actress from 30 Rock, was the gala host. The main stage keynote speakers included Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta Airlines, Rafet Ali, CEO and founder of Skift, Chip Connolly, New York Times bestselling author and former head of Airbnb Global Hospitality and Strategy, Dr. Henry Ting, he's the SVP and Chief Health Officer of Delta. There were television hosts, global directors at Amazon and Microsoft, editors-in-chief of magazines, many, many CEOs of successful hotel companies or products and services that sell into hotels, and of course, your girl, Sara Murray. And as you can imagine, I was getting pretty intimidating sending some of these messages because these people were so accomplished, and I just felt like they were going to see me as a fraud or a new person in the industry, or why is she speaking? And then at one point, I just chose not to feel that way. And that's going to be one of our first tips when we get into our tips, but I made a conscious choice to not be intimidated by the accolades of other people's achievements. Their successes do not diminish mine. And I really just changed my mindset to be, hey, we're on the same speaker page. I have just as much worth as you do. And you know what happened? Everyone accepted my invitation. Most responded so graciously. And it ended up being very cool. We talk about intentional networking on this show because once I got there, I felt like I already knew people because I had reached out to the other speakers ahead of time. It was so natural to say, oh, hey, I'm Sara. I'm speaking. We already connected. Da, 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 da. I think a lot of people were grateful that I was the one who reached out first. And the more I think about this, the more I'm convinced that one of the ways imposter syndrome manifests in our work lives is that we have been programmed to not share projects or events or circumstances where we crush it because we've been conditioned to not brag about or boast about our professional accomplishments. So, in some ways, the opposite of boasting about something is to make ourselves smaller so we don't inconvenience anyone and so we don't seem like we're arrogant. So, it makes a lot of sense. We have a lot of conflicting things in our brains and in our outward appearances. But I am just going to say this on this episode. I was and am really proud of myself. I built the relationships. I had an idea for the summit I felt would serve the audience well. My idea was accepted. I got myself on the speaker lineup. I got myself on the stage. I became a trusted collaborator with Forbes Travel Guide. My session was packed. People were actively listening and participating and taking photos of my slides. I had great compliments afterwards. I had great conversations afterwards. I have new speaking and training opportunities that came from it. It was truly a career highlight and a really big milestone for my business, and I'm proud of myself. So I want to thank you for letting me gush about it here. I am going to use this momentum and these feelings to really squash imposter syndrome when it rears its ugly head again. And I know it will because we are all human. If you're unsure if you've experienced imposter syndrome, here are some quick questions you can ask yourself. Do you downplay your successes or achievements as just luck or good timing? Do you worry that others will discover you're not as capable or as intelligent as they think you are? Do you feel you must work harder than others to prove your worth? Do you hesitate to ask for help, fearing it will reveal your incompetence? Do you brush off praise for your achievements? Are you unable to accept compliments? Do you compare your ability to others and feel lacking? Are you frustrated by your lack of desired outcomes and tying your results to your worth? If any of these things have ever taken up space in your mind, then odds are good you've probably had inklings of imposter syndrome. So, we're going to get into tips to quiet your imposter syndrome. And the first, we kind of mentioned it, you need to recognize it's not going away on its own. You are the only person capable of quieting these feelings. I'm using the word quiet here because it may never fully go away, but the goal is to get to a point where you're not letting it hinder your progress and taking action on your goals. So, listening to this podcast episode is a great way to work on this mindset. Tip number 2, ask yourself, is this true? And focus on the facts. When you have feelings of doubt or fear, or you want to make a self deprecating comment, ask yourself, is this true? Get curious about why you're thinking this about yourself and ask yourself if it's factually true. Look at the situation or the circumstances almost like a lawyer. Could this be argued in a court of law? That's going to help us remove any feelings from it and just look at the facts. If an objective third party was to view whatever situation you're feeling this imposter syndrome in, would they be thinking what you're thinking? Probably not. So asking yourself, is this true, is a nice way to level set and get you back to reality. Tip number 3 is feel your feelings. Part of the human experience is experiencing feelings, and no one is immune to feelings of doubts or fear. And when I find myself feeling these things, I do my best to just accept the feeling, move it through my body, and then keep moving forward on whatever big rock I'm chipping away at. And one of the ways I do this is going to sound silly, but sometimes I will even say out loud, like, I'm scared, I'm angry, I'm doubtful, I'm fearful, I'm feeling imposter syndrome. I literally just say it out loud. And I feel like just stating the feeling allows me to acknowledge it and helps me move on faster. Number 4, remind yourself of your achievements. Find ways to track your success. Keep a spreadsheet on your desktop titled 2024 accomplishments. And every time you get a compliment or you close a big sale or you execute a successful project, add it to the list. It's great for when your performance review time rolls around, but every time you open that file to add something else, you get a visual reminder of what you're capable of and how you've executed. I keep mine on a poster board in my office that I call my impact board. My presentation at the Forbes Travel Guide event had a small write up in Forbes as well, so you can bet that I printed that out and I stuck it on my impact board. If you want more details on this, listen to episode 52, Why Measuring Your Impact Increases Your Momentum. Tip number 5, share your wins with others. And this is where I thank you again for letting me share my pride in executing the summit discovery session. But I just want to give us all permission that it is okay to share our wins with other people. Be proud. It's not bragging. Your family, your friends, your colleagues, your clients, they're all going to be happy for you. They might even be inspired by you. It might actually be a disservice to not share your wins because you never know who you may be impacting. And if this makes you uncomfortable to start to share your wins, feel free to message me on LinkedIn or Instagram or email and let me know about a recent win and I will celebrate it with you. But start to share it. And one way that I recommend you do it in a way that doesn't sound braggy is just, hey, I'm so excited to share this with you. Here's what I did. Here's what I learned, etc. Like just come from a place of enthusiasm and it's not going to come across as arrogant or bragging. Tip number 6, lean into your authentic self. This is the theme of the year for me because being your authentic self invites others to be their authentic selves. I was nervous to reach out to the other speakers, but I just thought, you know what? I'm a friendly person. I'm approachable. Those are my core values. I'm just going to do it. And people were grateful that I did. Going to events where you don't know anyone can be intimidating no matter how accomplished you are or how often you do it. I was just my authentic, friendly self, and that's the energy that everyone matched me at. Tip number 7. This is the most important tip I can share with you, and I haven't heard it really shared elsewhere, so I hope you get a lot of value out of it. Take yourself out of the situation. Take yourself out of it. This is really important. If you take yourself out of it and look at whatever situation you're in from the standpoint of the person who put you in that position. For example, your boss gives you a promotion. Your team selected you to be a project lead. A client chose to do business with you as opposed to your competitor. If you then doubt yourself and your capabilities for that situation, then you're also doubting the judgment of your boss or your client or your company or your decision maker. So in my example, the decision makers for booking speakers for the summit are the executive leadership team at Forbes Travel Guide. And they are extremely accomplished in their careers. They've been in the industry for decades. If I were to have imposter syndrome about being selected as a speaker, then that would translate into me thinking that they don't know what they're doing by selecting me. So when I position it that way, of course I don't think that. I am constantly inspired by these individuals and I trust their judgment. So if they pick me, then it means I must be worthwhile and have value to their group. So that imposter syndrome just naturally diffuses because I took myself out of it and I looked at it from the decision maker's perspective. And now I can shift my focus and my energy into delivering a killer discovery session and an awesome presentation instead of doubt, fear, guilt that's just going to make me less confident. So to recap, decision makers could be your immediate boss, senior leadership, a hiring committee, your client, partnerships, podcast guests, any person or entity outside of you that has influence on putting you in a position to do a task. We need to ask ourselves if we feel like they don't know what they're doing. Taking ourselves out of it is the key. And finally, tip number 8, get so inspired by your work that you don't care what other people think. Even if you're dreading a task or you think you're going to be flailing at it, just keep your head down, do your best, use it as an opportunity to grow and be grateful and find inspiration for the lessons that you're learning along the way. I want to conclude this episode with my 2 favorite mantras that I heard on Jen Casey's podcast, The CEO Psyche, years ago, and they have meant so much to me, and they are perfect for this episode. The first mantra is, I give myself permission to be a beginner. And the second mantra is, I am already a master at making things happen. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on the show. Please share it with a friend or a colleague. If you're interested in learning more about my session that I presented at the Forbes Travel Guide Summit, please visit my website, saramurray.com/speaking, to see my demo reel and the session abstract. This was so well received, and I was so excited about it because it just allows us to scale this message of authenticity, confidence, self-leadership, leading others, and connecting on a human level. And I'm on a mission to do that. So I want to thank you so much for listening. Good luck tackling your imposter syndrome. You don't need to let it take you down. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to the Prospecting on Purpose podcast. If you loved what you heard today, subscribe to the podcast and please rate and leave a review. For more info on me, or if you'd like to work together, feel free to go to my website, saramurray.com. On social media, I'm usually hanging out at Sara Murray Sales. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.